Hey nerds, today I want to go over the Commander Banned and Restricted announcement from September 23rd, 2024, and give my thoughts on all the cards banned, except for one of them because who cares? So yeah, let's kick things off. Dockside Extortionist, Jeweled Lotus, Mana Crypt, and Nadu Winged Wisdom are all banned. I'm not really going to be talking about Nadu here. Shouldn't be really surprising. I talked about that card enough in the last few videos. Thank God it's gone. But the other ones I definitely want to touch on. So we can scroll down to the philosophy here on why they banned each card. So Mana Crypt, they're saying, coming down for no mana on turn 1, it's quite possible to have an explosive start of Mana Crypt into a Signet or Talisman, land, and then another Signet or Talisman, leaving that player untapping 5 mana on turn 2. In games going over 12 turns, the accumulated threat of damage from Mana Crypt provides a reasonable counterbalance for its explosive effect, but when you're snowballing to a turn 6 or 8 win, it's a meaningless drawback. And I definitely agree with most of this. The damage in Mana Crypt, I think in Commander specifically, isn't really a drawback, right? It's 3 life on a coin flip. You have 40 life to play with, unlike in regular, like 1v1 where you're at 20 life. The life loss is pretty negligible for the most part, especially when you're using it to combo off. And even if you're not playing it on turn 1, right? It might not always be correct to do that. Having a net positive mana rock like this that comes in for 0 and you get 2 is just absolutely backbreaking. I mean, look at cards like Dark Ritual, right? It's essentially, it's like Mana Crypt because it costs 1, so it gives you 3, so you end up netting 2 black. And that card is an absolute powerhouse, but you can only use it once. And the decks that abuse it, then obviously it's really powerful. But Mana Crypt's colorless, can go in any deck, and you're almost never right for cutting it. I think there are exceptions to that, of course, but generally speaking, if you put Mana Crypt over another card in your deck, you're right. Now, the biggest comparison to Mana Crypt is going to be Sol Ring, and they kind of go over that, which we'll cover after we look at the rest of these cards on why they left Sol Ring untouched. So next up is Jeweled Lotus. This is another card that can give you 5 mana on turn 2, and Jeweled Lotus does it without needing a good hand. Though you're restricted in what it can do for the mana, 4 and 5 mana commanders can pack significant punch nowadays, offering drawing cards to make up for one-shot mana, and defensive abilities such as Ward can't be interacted with early. Jeweled Lotus was 100% a printing mistake, and I think the rules committee even said, I don't know if it was Sheldon or someone on the RC said, they saw the card and said, hey, maybe don't, and then they did, and that's a problem. So a 0 mana artifact, for those who don't know, it's a 0 mana artifact, you sack it, add 3 mana of any one color, you can only cast your commander. So if you had a card like Urza, mono blue Urza, an island in this, you have Urza on turn 1. If you're playing partners, I don't know if there's any partners you can get with this, both partners out at the same time, maybe some background shenanigans you could do. But even like Orvar or any monocolored commander, Neheb, getting your commander out turn 1, turn 2 is absolutely insane. So yeah, I definitely think this card should have never been printed. It is really unfortunate that it's now completely useless. It's not banned in other formats, but you don't have commanders, so you literally can't play it anywhere. I would like to see them maybe errata this to say companion so people can play it in cube as like a weird build around. Or if you want to proxy it as an LED, I'm fine with that. LED's another, Lion's Eye Diamond is another card that maybe should be discussed, but I don't think it's nearly as prevalent as Mana Crypt or Jeweled Lotus. Next up is Dockside Extortionist. Now, Dockside isn't quite as explosive in early game as the other 2 cards, but it can still go mana positive on turn 2 and start generating substantial treasures after that. It's been on the border for years, and we've shied away from acting in it in the past because the card scaled well with the power level of the table, which I agree with, but it's a frequent contributor to more egregious snowballing starts. So I definitely agree with this with Dockside as well. I'm not like sad this is gone, but I feel like Dockside's one of those cards that it scales definitely with the power of the table more. I had a 4-color Blink deck for a while that used Dockside Kiki Jiki loops to Finale of Devastation people, and it's fun once or twice, but it definitely gets repetitive. So I think in casual games, getting rid of Dockside is fine. It does suck that it's still in a precon. I don't know if you can really get that precon anymore, but if a newer player or someone comes back and they have the deck still assembled and they can't play their Dockside, that definitely is a feel bad. However, this is a card that can see play in other formats still. I don't know if it's, I just started playing Legacy and Vintage. I don't think it's going to see any play there. And maybe we can see it in Cube as a sideboard card, but all in all, like, it sucks seeing it go, but at least it's playable elsewhere. And then, now let's talk about Sol Ring. They said we should also talk about the elephant in the room, They're not banning Soul Ring and have no desire to. Based on the criteria we've talked about here, it should be banned. Soul Ring is the iconic card of the format, and it's significantly tied to the identity of the format that it defies the laws of physics in a way that no other card does. And I 100% agree with this. So if we look at back in older formats where Brainstorm's legal, where it probably shouldn't be, or Pauper with the artifact lands, I think is that like an example of that, right? Where you have cards that are so entrenched with a format and the idea and the identity of that format that you really can't ban them in good faith. I think I agree with that here. Now, the other format this affects, which isn't a standalone format but is part of EDH, is CEDH, right? Competitive EDH. And this definitely hits that format in a big way. I think I've heard rumblings of people talking about Dockside being like probably a little problematic in that format in particular. And losing Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus with some fast mana is definitely not great. So I wonder how that format's going to adapt. I hope, there's still plenty of broken things to do without Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, Dockside. I'm sure some decks, specifically like 5 mana commanders, are going to be getting a lot worse with Jeweled Lotus being gone and Mana Crypt being gone. So I'm curious to see what happens with like the meta of that. So we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that. I don't think it should become its own format, but I can see people wanting that even more now, where you have these incredibly powerful cards banned. So we'll see what happens. But they've banned cards for CDH in the past, like Flash specifically, because of how oppressive it was. Now, the other thing I wanted to bring up and discuss as something I wish WotC would maybe do in situations like these, but it might be even more confusing or worse for the game, is erratating cards. So obviously, in a paper card game, it's not great to do that. Companions are a prime example of that, where you have 2 of the same cards with different text on them. But there could be a world where they errata these cards in a way that make them, people can still play them. Their value probably goes down a little bit, but they're still good. Even if it was these cards enter tapped. Because then you have to work around that ETB. You have Amulet of Vigor, of course, which can kind of make this a non-issue, but then you have to play that card. And that's taking up another slot, right? So I always wonder if there are more knobs they can turn to balance these cards, like very problematic cards that have issues, instead of just outright banning them. Because it definitely sucks that you can't use play pieces, right? Like I've used to play competitive and standard, and I'm used to bans, and it hurts, but you're like, it's what are you gonna do? But in this case, in a casual format, I think there might be ways around that. And also, because it's a casual format and there aren't really tournaments for it, if your play group's cool with it, just keep playing them. Or errata them yourselves and be like, hey, I want to play Mana Crypt, but can we say it enters tapped? Or hey, Dockside makes tapped treasures. Or Jeweled Lotus enters tapped or costs 3 mana, or some way what you think will balance the card, and then play with them. And that's fine. It's a casual game, it's a casual format. So I think that's fine. All in all, I think these bans are going to be better for the format as a whole, specifically when you're playing out in the wild and going to your LGS to play or what have you. In insulated pods, it's not going to be an issue like in my group. This doesn't affect anything because we don't usually play with these cards. And if someone wants to play a deck with these cards in them, because I know the group's power level and we all are familiar with each other, that's fine. I personally not going to care. But it's nice when you go to a Magic Con or something and people aren't going to slam Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, and it's like, there's the only 2 expensive cards in my deck and I happen to hit them and now we have a non-game. So yeah, I think overall this is a much better path for the format, and I hope they continue to be more aggressive with bans going forward. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on these bans in the comment section down below, and I will see y'all in the next video. All right, peace.